Welcome to another episode of Desperate Pursuit. I don't know what episode this is going to be, but we'll find out when it comes out. Today I have with me a good friend.
Yeah, my name is Parker Geddes. I am 26 years old, and I get the opportunity to work at North Rock Church.
I have you here because I wanted to talk about the beatitudes, right? And what it looks like for us to be blessed based on how the Bible says we're going to be blessed. We hear a lot of times how we can be blessed through praying and tithing. It's not that it isn't true. I just think that it's covered a lot
Mm-hmm.
to the point where even people who are not believers kind of understand that that's the case. Bless others and you'll be blessed. It's pretty straightforward, equal transaction type thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a different side of blessing that most people don't see, most people don't read, most people don't talk about all the time. And it's in the Beatitudes, and it's like one of the core foundations of how Jesus asks us to live.
Right.
So if you're looking to be blessed, right? If you're looking for blessings, if you're coming to God for blessings, either A, right, because you want to be near him and you consider being near him blessings, it's good to know this.
Mm-hmm.
Or B,
Right.
you're looking for blessings because you want some stuff for you. Well, let's take a look at what the price for that is, right? Metaphorically speaking, it's
Mm-hmm.
not a transactional type thing, but
Right.
if that's what you're looking for, be ready for what he says the requirement is. So we'll start in Matthew 5, where the Beatitudes start. If you want to read from, you can start reading from 3, and then we can stop wherever you think you have some comments on.
All right, to the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the humble, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. Such a beautiful message. I always love verse 9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. And like to be like a peacemaker is such a hard thing to actually do, just because like as we see like the life of Christ, like to be a peacemaker is to not return evil with evil, because he says that like it is not to go eye for eye or tooth for tooth. It is to go deeper than that, and like that's where my mind goes to like what it means to like truly be a peacemaker is to not like is to just simply turn the other cheek. If you were to slap me, I would offer you the other one, just because like you're angry for something that's outside of just you and I.
I guess we're gonna like jump right off into the deep end too on that, because I agree with what you're saying. I also think what's interesting is that being a peacemaker is a little more than turning the other cheek or
Mm-hmm.
trying to do you know, what's passive. I think I always relate pacifism with peacemaking.
Mm.
It's actually the opposite, right?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
To an extent, peacemaking is an aggressive standpoint almost, or aggressive mindset,
Mm-hmm.
because it's also, because when you're seeking peace, sometimes it means cutting down enemies.
Right.
Like not everyone's always going to be seeking peace. Well, then what? It's like, okay, well, they're going to force war. Well, how do you make peace if the enemy's intent on war? Well, it's not like rolling over.
Right.
Because then, well, at the same time, right, let's say the enemy wins because you roll over. Well, the enemy's not for peace.
Mm-hmm.
So the only way to bring peace is if the enemy insists on going to battle, that you go to battle and win.
Right.
Right? Not even just go to battle, but also win
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, which is nice because we start from a position of victory. Now, whether we follow through with that from our faith is a different story. But, I think that's just going a lot towards what peacemaking is. Not being so straightforward as like, yeah, I agree, right? Turn the other
Right.
cheek, but not being so straightforward as that always being
Mm-hmm.
the solution to whatever problem.
No, I completely agree, because like if you think about it, it's like peacemaking is being like submissive to God. Like to submit is an action verb. That means like we can't just lay down on our backs and like expect peace to like come to us, or like expect blessings to fall upon us just because like we're in a worldly state of submission. to like truly submit is to be in like a state of action, and like to do that we have to go further into it than just simply sometimes turning the other cheek, because like it is spiritual warfare. I think you said this, like, what glory can we give to God if we never go to battle? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it's the same thing with like being a peacemaker. So like it's in direct opposition of the enemy. So like, we can't just lie down and expect a victory. Like we'll have to like take action and fight.
I didn't know that you remember that. I remember you saying you were going to write it down, but I didn't know that you had remembered that.
I have it in my Tuesday morning prayer. I'm still going to use it.
That's crazy. But also, I was looking at it. I think it goes also to verse 11. So it goes through verse 11.
Yep.
Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Right? There's a little asterisk there too, is because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Just on that, while I'm reading it too, when he's saying rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. The other day, I had like some conviction in Tuesday morning prayer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how people like can see how I worship. Everyone else is like all like in this like worship state, and my eyes are like open and they're like active and moving. I am self-conscious about it a little bit, but not always,
Mm-hmm.
not too often. I'm not
Right.
too often self-conscious, but sometimes I wonder. Anyways, the reason I'm doing that, right, is because I'm thinking about something. I'm trying to relate it back to what do these lyrics mean? How do I see this? Sometimes I'm like just enjoying the moment of like, this is what it's going to be like in heaven. One of the things that was said the other day, or not said the other day, but one of the things that we sang for Tuesday morning prayer the other day was we were just saying nothing else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've done that like 100 times. I don't know what made it different, but I was thinking about it of like nothing else. And for some reason, I was thinking about, treasures in heaven. What's my treasure in heaven going to look like? And I always thought about it of like, when I get to heaven, I may not be rich here, but in heaven I'll have like gems and rubies, and I'll have like this big storehouse of treasure. It's gonna be crazy. Like I'll be poor here, but I'll be rich there. And God kind of convicted me, right? And he was like, "Do you think if that's not your treasure on earth, why would that be your treasure in heaven?"
Mm.
And I was like, "Okay, all right." And I was like, "Okay, well, what would my treasure in heaven look like? What would my storehouse look like?" And then this like room that was like a mountain of gold and gems and all that suddenly was empty, and it was just an empty room, and I was like, okay, why an empty room? And then I was thinking about it, and I opened my eyes and I like saw everyone around. I was like, okay, I get it. Like it's an empty room because it has space for more people. Like there's
Right.
space for other people in here. The less earthly treasure I have in this storehouse, the more people can be here,
Mm-hmm.
because people are the treasure. And so the more I'm willing to give up earthly treasure, the more heavenly treasure I actually get. I was just seeing it wrong, but he convicted me of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then he showed me what it actually was, which I thought was cool, and kind of like, it was a bit abrupt too, of like,
Right.
you've been thinking about this all wrong this whole time. So I thought it was cool, and I enjoyed that. And I think, I don't know how other people look at it. Maybe other people are smarter than me in that sense. So they figured that out way before I did. But it's just this thing of people always think that treasure is going to be more this, more that,
Right.
upgraded lifestyle luxury. When treasure, most likely, if we're looking at it from God's perspective, right, we're his treasure. Like you think about it, heaven is God's like treasure house.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's it going to be full of? Yeah, gold and buildings and street, but who's it for? Us, right? Like him ultimately, but
Yeah.
who's he inviting into his house? It's going to be us, right? And so the same would be true for us. Is like if we're one with God, we're not in opposition to him, right? At that time, there'll be no conflict, no opposition with him. Then our hearts are aligned in that whatever his treasure is, our treasure is. It makes sense that people, if that's his treasure, is also our treasure. So I just think people get that mixed up a lot, and that's something that we don't really consider too often.
Right. Because I mean, even in verse 3, if we go back to the Beatitudes, like, blessed are the poor in spirit, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. Like, just because you're poor on earth, like, doesn't mean you can't have abundance in heaven, because there will be abundance. And like if we know that we can't take anything to heaven besides our souls, like why would we be so fixated on things that we can accumulate here? Because like just like you were saying, like yeah, like I thought about that too. Is like, oh, like what kind of car am I going to drive in heaven? Oh, it's going to be sick. Doesn't matter, because like we'll probably have the ability to fly, but that's just nonsense.
I mean, why?
But like you know what I mean though, just
Mm-hmm.
because like we like all things are possible through God. So like why would I even need that? Just because I can walk out of like what God promises me, like my mansion, to be in His presence immediately. You know what I mean? Like what greater gift and what greater treasure can we have to literally walk outside and be like, oh, hey Jesus, you know what I mean?
Or not even like
Like
walk
an
outside, just invite him in and be like, hey,
literally
you want to come
exactly.
over?
Like, hey, you want to have dinner tonight? And he just knocks on the door, like
Yeah,
like
that'll
we're
be
doing
sick.
right now. Like that'd be so cool.
That would be
And
sick.
like what greater blessing to like find richness in? Because I also feel like being poor and being rich is like a mindset. Because like yes, like I might not have a lot of money, but I have all that I need. So like why would I need more?
As we're talking about it, what is occurring to me, what's interesting is that I don't think it's just me that's thought about this. What it was like for the disciples to like actually be next to Jesus and
Mm-hmm.
like sit down with him, have dinner with him, all that. What it was like to just like be actually with him while they were on earth. And I don't think I ever translated that to, well, I will know one day. Like it will and won't be the same, right? It won't be on earth in flesh necessarily,
Right.
but it'll be the same concept, same feeling, same like experience, I guess is a good word for it.
Mm-hmm.
Of being able to do that, of like sit down and invite them into my home, do this, do that. So, not right now, but later and be the same thing. And
Right.
since it's eternity, right, it doesn't really matter
Mm-hmm.
because it'll happen at some point. And by the time we're like eons later, it's like, oh, I don't even remember what happened, when I was on Earth, whatever.
Right.
I mean, that's part of the thing, anyways, is you lose your earthly memories. But same idea is what I'm trying to say.
I don't know. I always think it's interesting of like people like seeing like Jesus eating dinner with people and them like also wanting that same experience. And just like you were saying, like people don't like realize that that can still ring true for you.
Hmm.
Like yes, just because you weren't one of the 12 or however many people Jesus got the opportunity to sit down and eat with, like it you still can. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And I feel like that's just like such a cool way of like thinking about it. Like it's like just because it doesn't happen on earth doesn't mean it won't happen ever.
Yeah.
Because like we know we are created in God's image, but then we also read that like Jesus had to take on human form. So there we know that like our flesh isn't the image of God. So then it's like, okay, so then what about us is it what is the image of God? So then it has to be our spirit. So our spirit is what is in made of the image of God, and Jesus had to take on our form so that we can relate to Him greater. And I feel like that's just like the perfect example of like what that truly means.
We talked about what the world considers blessing and what God considers blessing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we were gonna talk about it anyways, but I think we just kind of got off on the tangent naturally. So now I kind of want to put an emphasis on who exactly and what exactly it is that ushers that blessing in, per se. Like, what characteristics is he listing here, or what kind of people, right? Because if they're characteristics, then some of them are characteristics, some of them are lifestyles, some of them are choices, right? Some of them are just like consequences of the
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle that we have, right? So you already highlighted poor in spirit. Verse 4 says, those who mourn will be comforted. I mean, I'm not going to explain. I don't think I need to explain why being comforted is a blessing, right? If you're following Christ, then being with Christ, being comforted by Christ is like, that's huge. That's like, thank you. There literally isn't a different, there's not any kind of type of peace on earth that is the same as him
Mm-hmm.
comforting you from experience, right? I mean, I don't know all of the piece of the earth brings. But to be honest, I don't need to. I don't want to. Right?
Right.
There just isn't anything that compares. And then blessed are the meek. Meek is interesting because I think meek is one of those words that I could put it under the like the first few podcasts that I did were designed around redefining words,
Mm-hmm.
but not necessarily redefining them, more so bringing them back to what they were supposed to originally mean. And I think meek is one of those words that could kind of fit in there because meek now translates to like weak and feeble and but meek is not necessarily weak or feeble. Meek is more comparable to humility.
Mm-hmm.
It's somebody who even people who are capable of grandeur, right? Like not like making claims from pride and then being able to back it up, but choosing not to because they're being humble, they're sacrificing their will, their time, their energy to whatever it is that the kingdom needs, right? So meek is not meek is not weak, right? I think I heard that said somewhere. Meek is
Mm-hmm.
not weak. But that kind of going there, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. And I think you can also compare that too to Solomon. I think Solomon's a good comparison to that, right? Because he sacrificed like thousands and thousands of livestock
Right.
before God was like, "Hey, what do you want in return for this?" Not in that attitude. It
Mm-hmm.
was more of like, "Hey, thank you for all these sacrifices. I see your heart. What do you want in return?" And all Solomon wanted was the wisdom to lead the kingdom well, and God was like, "Well, you'll have that and more." And that's kind of what the idea is here is like being meek, right? Like being able to look for, seek out, acquire earthly things by earthly means, choosing not to do that in humility and saying, "Hey, I could do this thing, I could do what everyone else is doing, but I'm not gonna. I'm gonna submit to whatever your will is." And then that's when Jesus is saying here, "For they will inherit the earth."
Mm-hmm.
Because in fairness, right? If everything is under Jesus, well, Jesus distributes it. And so when he inherits it, you inherit it because he's like bringing you under the umbrella. So then that's the only way to inherit it really
Right.
is because everything else is temporary.
I also think it's really cool how you bring up Solomon because that verse, it's verse 4, right? Verse 5.
Yeah.
Um, like that verse connects to Psalms 37, 1 through 11, where it's like, it's the instruction of wisdom of David. And like the first three verses is like, do not be agitated by evildoers. Do not envy those who do wrong, for they wither quickly like grass and they will wilt like tender green plants. Trust in the Lord and do what is good. Dwell in the land and live securely. Take delight in the Lord and he will give you your heart's desires. So it's like taking the choice, like you were saying. Like I can either choose to view how I am living humbly or how I'm living poorly. You know what I mean? And I feel like, yes, like those words like may be synonyms, but like they have drastically different meanings on like how you can highlight them. You know what I mean? Because like if we'd like go back to that, it's like we can live securely, like in our meekness,
Mm-hmm.
because we are living in surrender and being servants to the Lord Almighty and being a living testimony to somebody else that may need that. And I feel like that's like where the power of like trying to be humble remains, because like it is so easy to get off track with humility just because like you can have one blessing that came from God. It didn't even come from you. Like, yeah, you might have worked for it, but that doesn't equate it to you earning it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
I actually have a good example for that.
yeah.
Yeah. That's going to be in Daniel. I think it starts in chapter 2, really, where Daniel interprets the king's dream.
Right.
And long story short, right, Daniel does this thing that nobody else can do. He's like, King Nebuchadnezzar has sorcerers and astrologers and all those people who should be able to interpret this dream because that's what they claim to be able to do. They can't do it because what the king's asked is, you tell me what the dream is first and then interpret it.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like, well, no one could do that. You got to tell me what the dream is and then we can interpret it.
Right.
Except Daniel, who has the God who actually sent Nebuchadnezzar the dream. And then he tells Daniel, Daniel tells the king the exact dream. And the king is like, oh, for sure. Like, you are the guy. and I don't remember if he rewards him before he interprets it or after. I think either way he gets rewarded, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think Nebuchadnezzar also realizes that he serves, and what I think is cool, this is just a side note, but Nebuchadnezzar refers to Daniel's God as the holy gods, right? Because he's
Mm-hmm.
still polytheistic, but he refers to Daniel's gods as the holy God, and he refers to his own gods as gods. So even Nebuchadnezzar, while he didn't really believe, not yet at least, still refers to God as holy.
Right.
That aside, because I think that's cool. That aside, he rewards Daniel, and Daniel has a squad with him, right? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And so the king rewards Daniel, and I think he gives him a higher position. I think he's like governor. I don't remember the exact position without having to read through this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, no, it says the king placed Daniel in a high position and lavished many gifts on him. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all its wise men. And then it says, verse later, 49, Daniel chapter 2, verse 49. Moreover, at Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego administrators over the province of Babylon, while Daniel himself remained at the loyal court. So Daniel and squad have officials, like their official roles now, not just wise men or whatever
Mm-hmm.
that are like they have like governor roles. They're an official in the kingdom. We go to chapter 3. It's the story of the furnace, right?
Yep.
And you know the popular story is they aren't bowing to this golden idol that Nebuchadnezzar set up. And Nebuchadnezzar is not happy. The whole furnace thing happens. I have another side note on that in a second, but I'll get to this first. What puts him there, right? Because it's an assembly that everyone's going to bow down to this golden idol, but it's not everyone in the kingdom. It says in verse 2, he then summoned the satraps, the prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all other provincial officials to come up to the dedication image he had set up. So the promotion in chapter 2, if I'm not mistaken, maybe I have the governing hierarchy wrong and the wise men would have been there anyways. But from what I can read, right, their promotion in chapter 2 now puts them in chapter 3, where they have to go and be at the idol.
Mm-hmm.
If they never get these promotions, they never have to go worship the idol. But because they got the promotion, now they're put in this adverse situation of either you do what everyone else is doing or you die.
Yeah.
And they choose not to, and they go through the whole faith thing. But I think it's cool that the thing that elevated them was the same thing that put them in the position of life and death and to hold out that faith.
Mm-hmm.
And to eventually go on to be like, even if he doesn't save us from the furnace, we still worship him and not you. And then the side note that I had about chapter 3 is the men who threw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in burned up. It says Nebuchadnezzar, who eventually does believe in God and recognizes him as the one most high, the Holy One,
Mm-hmm.
goes to the entrance of the furnace, doesn't burn up. It's just interesting that the soldiers would burn up and not Nebuchadnezzar, who would ultimately be saved.
That is an interesting way of thinking about it, actually.
I think it's cool because it's just another little point of like, anybody who past, present, or future would give their life to Christ, regardless of whether you have accepted
Mm-hmm.
Jesus or not.
Right.
If you are a child of God, past, present, or future, he's gonna like
His protection is over you.
Yeah.
That's really good. And I also think like you can go back to the beatitudes and like they chose to remain humble and like God granted them wisdom with like choosing to remain humble because like you said, like they're now in a position of worldly power that Nebuchadnezzar gave them. And just like we see like the prefects and all the governors, like they bow before this. And they're like, okay, like these are my equals while I'm here on earth. And like I would assume they were friends also, outside of just the four of them. But they still had the choice to choose either wisdom or to choose death.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we go back to that, like, yes, Nebuchadnezzar gave them the live or die. What's the word I'm looking
Ultimatum.
for? Ultimatum. Yeah, the live or die ultimatum. But God also gave them the same ultimatum. Because, like, if we go to Philippians 1:21, to me, to live is Christ and to die is gain. And that's like the ultimate example of like what that is. Like we chose to, obviously Jesus hadn't come quite yet, but like they chose to live like Christ did. And they knew that if they were to die, they would gain everything and then more. Just to kind of bring it back to like the storehouse that we were talking about earlier. So it's just kind of like a cool connection point right there. But it's like our choices is what like truly matter, and like how we view things.
I feel like it does play a little bit into it, but verse 6, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. For a while, I kind of like glanced over that and I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Like the righteous are filled.
Mm-hmm.
But thinking about it now, it's like, what do you hunger for? What do you thirst for? Metaphorically speaking or spiritually speaking, even literally speaking. What is it? Money that you hunger for? Is your focus on, is your thirst for love or acceptance, a good perception of who you are, right? Do you trans all fancy and you want people to look at you like you're the best, you're the guy, you're the girl, whatever? Or are you hungry and thirsting for righteousness? Everything else that's not righteousness isn't going to fill.
Mm-hmm.
Like righteousness is the only thing that fills. It's, I mean, quite literally the only thing he lists as far as blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. That's it. There's no other word. It's just for righteousness, comma, for they will be filled.
Right.
And that's the only way to be filled.
Mm-hmm. I also think like the cool thing about that is because that also connects to Matthew chapter 7 verses 7 through 11,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like the ask, seek, and knock. So like when we're hungry as kids, like what do? You just like you go cook a meal? Like no, you don't have the knowledge to do that. Like you go ask your parents. Like you're like, what do I need? Like how can I like fill this desire? You know what I mean? So like if we go, I want to read the verse so I don't mess it up, is like, ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be open to you. So like if we are like hungering and thirsting for righteousness, like obviously like what does it even look like? Like what does that mean to do? And like we can't just come about that just by going to Whataburger down the street, like, hey, can I have righteousness? You know what I mean? It's like who can we ask that we know is righteous, that we be granted that thirst and that desire of hungering for it. Because if we don't ask, like I don't, in my eyes, like we can't ever be filled. You know what I mean? Just because like we know God is a gentle God and a just God, and He's not just going to kick in the door, even though He could, but He's not going to. Like He wants us, like He's going to keep knocking at the door, but if we finally like open the door and let Him in, then like our hunger and thirst will finally be like satisfied. But I feel like they all just come down to like our choices at the end of the day. Like one, how are we choosing to posture our heart? Because like it is say like, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. But like we have the choice to like what we're viewing with our eyes and what we're listening to with our ears is like what comes from the heart, or like what we're filling with our heart. So like if we are looking at worldly things, like it is not a pure heart that we are gaining. Like we are gaining an evil, wicked heart.
I was going to say that's pretty straightforward. But now thinking on it, maybe it's, I guess it depends on where you're at.
Right.
Pure in heart.
Because that's hard to do.
Pure in heart, I think, has more to do with actions.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least that's what it seems.
Right.
And I think when we think about actions, we tend to think about ourselves, like, what are we doing? What are we saying? And that's true. I think I think what I would like to add to that is more of an extension of what are we doing to or for others? What are we doing, or what are we saying to or for others? I think if we don't add the for others part,
right,
we tend to be introspective and then look too much to ourselves, right? Like I've learned that there is, and I can kind of gauge where I'm at spiritually in my walk with how often am I needing to spiritually care for myself?
Mm-hmm.
How often am I needing to say, God, fill me, God, forgive me, God, do this for me, as opposed to, God, do this for them, help them,
right,
be with them. There's a difference there. Not because I think that I'm better than them, right? When I'm not in dire need, like I'm at wit's end, God, you got to fill me up. That kind of dire need. It becomes this thing of how can I help others? How can I love others? How can I pour out? Right.
Right.
And I think that's what pure in heart is really saying, to connect the dots with, for they will see God. I think one time, I think I've said it on the podcast, but I'll say it again. Part of something that God had shown me once was, if you want to be in my presence, right, it's great to look up and it's great to go to the secret place.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying not to do those things. I think those things are great. I think we miss an opportunity to see God, to be with Jesus when we're not looking out, like
Right.
around us. Because if the Spirit of God lives in each of us, then it also follows that, well, I should be able to look around and see Jesus in people and experience Jesus in other people who believe, right? Not necessarily people who don't believe yet, right? But at least in believers,
Mm-hmm.
I should be able to see that. And so if we're not being able to look outside of ourselves, then, right, it's just kind of that hard thing of, we're so focused on us, so maybe prideful, maybe ego plays an issue. Not always. Sometimes we are in dire need.
Mm-hmm.
It's human nature.
Absolutely.
But if we're pure in heart, there will be far and few times between where we'll need that, dire fill. It shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
be every like other month or every other week. I'm like, God, please. I'm like
Mm-hmm.
struggling. At some point, we should be able to see God in others, right? To see how He's working in their life, or how He can work in their life, what He's doing, what He's growing, how we can be a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that to be pure in heart also has to do with that extension of for others.
Right. And I also like how you are like including the others, because I think the verbiage here like really indicates that, just because it says, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. It doesn't say you will see God.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so I think like you're like right on it, just because like it is more than just an us thing. Like, this is the people we are mentoring, these people who are mentoring us. These are our families, these are our friends, and just like the random people we may encounter throughout the day. Because like if we are to clothe ourselves in compassion and to help others do that, like why wouldn't we want to do that for others? Because like
Mm-hmm.
if we look at the story of Acts chapter 3, where John and Peter are walking to the temple, and there's a guy that's born lame, so he was born paralyzed, and like everyone else was just walking past him. Like why would we just walk past people that we could walk into heaven with? Because like if the Holy Spirit is in the building, like that room is like heaven. Like, yes, it might not be heaven, but heaven is where Jesus is, and like the Spirit of God dwells. So like who are we to withhold that from somebody else? So like, are we pure in heart if we aren't like willing to share what we have with others? Because like it's like you were saying, it's so easy to just, it's kind of corny, but to be a me monster. And like my eyes have been opened that to me recently. It's like, God, like speak to me. God, like use me. Like, God, like allow me to be a pure vessel for you. Like no, like how can we do this together? Like how can I bring other people before you that we can, I said it earlier, but populate heaven? Like, because that's the end goal, is to have as many people in heaven as possible. Because like it can be so simple to just like try to choose others. Because if we go back to that story in Acts with Peter, like Peter just says to the man, like, look at us. And like he wasn't just going to hand the man money. That's what the man was looking for. And not, I wouldn't say he's ignorant, but like he didn't know what he didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And what he needed to know was like Jesus was the answer to his problems. Like he was granted the ability to walk in the name of Jesus of Nazareth. And like Peter knew that giving him more than what he wanted is what he needed, and not just giving him what he wanted to just be satisfied.
What I do want to look at for verse 9 is, it says, for they will be called children of God. But the stipulation there is, I don't know if it's a stipulation, but I know that the part that precedes it, same verse, blessed are the peacemakers, right? And I'm not saying peacemakers is directly connected to children of God. Like if you're not a peacemaker, you're not a child of God.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, a little bit like he's saying, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God, which gives us a charge of being peacemakers. And it's not like, oh, if you want to be blessed, right, go be a peacemaker. It's more like, do you want to be called a child of God? Okay,
Right.
go be a peacemaker. And you'll be blessed for being a peacemaker. But really here, like you, like blessing is not even the main focus as much as it should be, like
Mm-hmm.
child of God.
I agree. And I also think like going back to verse 8, I think that is like so intentional by Jesus in using his verbiage. Um, of just like, blessed are those who are pure in heart, because blessed are the peacemakers. So like it is like our choice and like how we're viewing things, and it's our heart posture is like how we view like being a peacemaker. Like, is my heart posture, I want to be a peacemaker so I can receive God's blessing? Or am I a peacemaker because like I'm a son of God and I'm adopted by the Lord Almighty himself?
I also think too, what's interesting is there can be a focus so much on growing your relationship with God,
Mm-hmm.
right? That we forget to be peacemakers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what makes it so important is that the peacemakers are who are called children of God. So if we're only like oh God, like me and you in this thing, we're just soaking in he loves me, he this, he that. Well, yeah, that's true. He's also given you a charge too that goes along with it. He didn't just say come to my kingdom and enjoy who I am.
Mm-hmm.
He's giving you a charge, right? Be a peacemaker, which means you're gonna have to go and find places that are in conflict
Right.
and then make peace.
Yeah,
Like you don't just get to sit on the sideline and enjoy the win.
exactly. Because I think it just comes back to like the submission.
Yeah.
Like we have to submit to wanting to deal with the hardship of conflict, because obviously no conflict is easy.
An example, since I'm thinking about it, right? Since
Mhm.
I said sideline, is like you don't get to call yourself champion if you're not like playing the game.
Mm-hmm.
If you're gonna sit on the bench the whole time, don't call yourself champion. You didn't do nothing
Right.
to win this champion. You mean you're on the team maybe, but you didn't help do anything. Like you put the jersey on, okay, but you didn't do nothing. Like
Mm-hmm.
I mean, don't pride yourself in calling yourself a champion if you're not gonna contribute to the. I don't know. Maybe as I'm like saying, I don't know if that's the best analogy, but
Right.
I think the idea there is that it's a little maybe it's a little different from that
Right.
example in the fact that you can't sit on the sideline and still be called a
Mm-hmm.
champion.
No, I think you're kind of right, just because like with that, like with how we are given Christ, right? So like if we accept him into our hearts, he gives us the jersey.
Mm-hmm.
But just because we have the jersey doesn't mean we are peacemakers.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So like it gives us the option to be peacemakers. And I think that's where like you were kind of going with it. Just because we're wearing the jersey and sitting on the bench when people in the game need our help. Like I think that's where like you were kind of going with it, where it's just like I have the ability to help, but I'm choosing not to, out of fear and out of, oh, I got the jersey, that's all I need. Like no, just because like yes, our works are dead without faith, but our faith should equivalate to our works. Like you should be able to see our faith in our works. Is a better way of putting it.
Yeah, I think also too, as you were saying that, maybe something else I can add to that is like if you're on the sideline, the expectation is if you need to go get in the game,
Right.
you go get in the game.
Exactly.
Right? Maybe you're not called to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like let's say the thief on the cross, for example, never did anything to go anywhere to say to anyone,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. But you know, he still made it into heaven.
Mm-hmm.
So in some aspects, there are people who like at the very end of their life are saved.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe not necessarily to that extent, right? Like let's say though that category of people are the people on the bench who maybe never play.
Mm-hmm.
But the expectation is if you're going to be on the bench, that if you're called to be in the game, that you do go be in the game.
You're prepared.
Not just be like, well, actually, I kind of don't want to play. Okay, well then, you know, then you're not on the team if you don't want to play.
Yeah, exactly. I also think the thief on the cross is such a great example. just because I feel like he's not talked about nearly enough either, just because of like what that really meant. He was living his life in complete opposition, where he deserved to be put on the cross for what he had done. But on the other hand, there was a guy that also deserved to be on the cross that was mocking Jesus for being innocent. So like he easily could have like had the heart posture of like, okay, I'm just gonna make fun of this guy because he's going through the same thing I'm going through. But he had his eyes opened and realized that like this guy is innocent and is willing to still do this. Like why? And was able to like question his entire life within a couple of hours. You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
to realize that like I lived my entire life wrong in just like a split second is kind of like crazy. Because like I read in a story, um, it was during World War II where this son went off to college and then the war started. And right before the war started, he went back home and told his dad that like I don't believe in your God, so don't force me your religion on me and don't force me to go to church. But then he went off to World War II, and during that time he was flying a plane, and the plane's engine caught on fire, and all of him and all of his men had to jump out of the plane. And it was said that before he hit the water, he knew his father's God and that he knew Jesus. So like it literally takes like a split moment for an entire lifespan of wrong to be changed.
I think what is also cool, as you were saying that, is that thinking about being on the cross, right? Because I can't really imagine how painful that would be.
Yeah, right.
I also think that in that moment, I would be so concerned and focused on how much I'm in pain.
Right.
So this guy had to put all of that to the side, like every ounce of self-preservation that's by nature in
Mm-hmm.
his DNA to the side, and consider who Jesus was and is, and the whole idea. So as
Right.
you were saying that, I was thinking about that.
That's what I'm saying is it's kind of mind blowing just because like in that much pain and then to realize like you lived your entire life wrong in a split moment like that, like you know how crushing that would be. And like obviously like he knew he lived his life wrong, like he earned his consequences of having to die on the cross.
Mhm.
But at the same time, it was just like that. This I don't know. It just kind of blows my mind to think about.
And then it also inverted. Well, the next verse really, blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness. I think people often overlook the idea that they're going to be persecuted.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing that I want to look at is because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. It needs to be for righteousness. It can't just be arbitrary persecution.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't just equate every ounce of persecution you experience to righteous suffering. It's not the same. It
Right.
needs to be for righteousness.
Mm-hmm.
So, like for example, if you're doing something that's not godly, and a group of people who are Christians are like, "Hey, that's not right. You really shouldn't be doing that," and you just refuse to change your way, and you are in a sense persecuted, like they kind of don't want to associate with you because you're actively living in sin, and they've approached you and tried to help you with it, and you just refuse to do anything. That's not the same thing.
Right.
Like maybe you chalk that up to persecution, but it's not for righteousness.
Mm-hmm.
So blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Right, so it's got to be for righteousness. Also, be ready to be persecuted.
Right.
Right. And what's interesting is that again, the whole point is blessed. Like, what are blessings, and how does it correlate to the world versus how we should be seeing it? Is blessed are those who are persecuted. So, if you want blessing, then I mean, by definition, go look for what gets you persecuted for righteousness.
Right.
Right. Not what makes you accepted for righteousness. Not what makes you feel like you fit in for righteousness.
Mm-hmm.
Not like what you feel gives you purpose for righteousness.
Right.
Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness.
Yeah. I mean, because you can even just take it back to like our sports analogy. Like if you're not willing to go into the game and to suffer the hardship of like that, of like the exhaustion, the pain, the bruises, the blood, and like everything that comes with it, like what blessing can you get from it if you're just only willing to watch and like and expect everybody else to do it for you, but you're not also willing to do that for somebody else.
Also, to extend that analogy while you're saying that, because you said something that provoked this thought.
Mm-hmm.
To be on the team, to be in the game, to be in the Super Bowl, you got to practice.
Right.
Like always.
Mm-hmm.
You always have to be practicing. If it's off season, great, enjoy some family time. But I promise you, people who are in the off season are practicing on their own.
Right.
So you got to always be practicing. And I think that's the extension of that analogy is to even be in the game, right? Or to even be on the sideline, you got to be practicing like crazy. And the same is true in the walk of faith, right? Like to even be on the sideline and considered a champion, whether you play officially on the field or not,
Mm-hmm.
it still requires a level of practice.
Exactly.
Whether you're called to be in the game or not, you got to practice. Otherwise, you're not even going to make the team that gets to the Super Bowl.
Exactly. Like you don't even get the chance to do it. Because if we take it back to like scripture, like in First Philippians chapter 27, just as one thing, as citizens of heaven, live your life worthy of the gospel of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And like how did Jesus live his life, and like why would somebody even want to follow Jesus? Like, I mean, obviously because like he was willing to suffer through all of the things we had to suffer, we get to suffer through. Because like we can find joy in that suffering because we know that our Lord and Savior took upon our fleshly form to do that for us. Because like why would we want to follow Jesus, or why would we want to follow somebody or take advice from somebody who hasn't gone through it? Like you're not going to go seek wise counsel from somebody who hasn't been through anything. And like he's like the perfect example. He went 33 years of his life on earth. Like that's more than enough time to experience anything the enemy can throw at you.
Mm-hmm.
Like especially him. Like the 40 days in the wilderness and dying on a cross. Like the amount of humility that you have to do, and like the exaltation that like comes from that is like he was willing to die the most humiliating death, and he was willing to serve the lowest of the low and be the lowest of the low, even though we know his name's above all names. Like that just rings true with like the persecution and like why it is to like take joy in that.
Going back to the peacemaker thing, when you look at Jesus traveled like all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he was not always peaceful. And he said that he came to bring a sword, right, to create
Mm-hmm.
division in households. Which, yes, disunity is what the enemy uses, but Jesus didn't mean disunity as in like fight amongst yourselves, like house to house type thing
Mm-hmm.
of his own people. What he meant was a sword, so that there's a line in the sand, a sword to spiritual flesh or spirit and flesh, right? Of now there's this line in the sand. You've got to decide what side you're on.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not picking my side, well, you're getting the sword, right?
Right.
In a spiritual and literal sense of you get justice and judgment if you don't pick grace, which I don't know. To this day, that does confuse me. But who picks judgment over grace? But he even flipped tables too, right?
Right.
I think that was where I was going with it a bit too. Is he flipped tables? So the idea of peacemaker isn't always.
I completely agree, because I always think that like people always think of like Christians that like, oh, we're not supposed to be angry, oh, we're not supposed to be this, we're not supposed to be that. I was like, why would God allow us to have these emotions if we weren't allowed to use them justly and righteously? You know what I mean? So like with like flipping the tables, like I'm not gonna flip it. I guess you could flip a table if you're happy, but not in that context. Like he was mad that they were using his temple as a storehouse to like sell merchandise. So like he was angry in that moment. So like why as Christians do we think that we're not allowed to be upset and angry at things that like in context we should be angry about?
Yeah. I was thinking about that too, because I so rarely ever get angry now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the other day the Lord was talking about you got to learn to like utilize and not just suppress the anger.
Exactly.
Like utilize it the way it's supposed to be, because I gave you the emotion for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, is that God talking? Like would God be encouraging me to be angry? And then I thought about the table flipping, and I was like, okay, no, yeah, he would, because
Mm-hmm.
there is a way that we should be in it. All throughout the Old Testament, right?
Right.
God was
God's wrath was over everything.
yes, yeah. So there is a way that it's supposed to be used, but again, it goes toward like you have to use discipline
Mm-hmm.
and love with it. Like there has to be that tandem,
Exactly.
because if without it, right, it becomes sin.
And just a
Sinful.
temper tantrum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. I feel like we've covered a lot of it, but maybe not hit the maybe not just driven the point home.
Mm-hmm.
Is what about this, right? Because in the Beatitudes, there's some good that people would want to be,
Right.
but there's also some negatives, right? People don't want to be persecuted.
Mm-hmm.
People don't want to have all kinds of evil
Right.
said against them. I don't, right? Do I take it?
Yeah.
Yes. But do I want it to? No.
Right. And like, who wants to mourn?
Yeah. So why and how does that speak to a loving God that he would ask us to do that, really? In the sense that, right, because I think a big question that people who maybe don't believe would look at this and be like, well, why would your God want you to be in a position to mourn? Why would he want to create that position that you would be mourning?
Mm-hmm.
Why does he want you to suffer persecution? Like I think in our human understanding, and there are some verses that go along with this, like if you value your family more than me, you're not worthy of me. But we would think, right, I don't want my family to go through pain and suffering and persecution.
Mm-hmm.
Why would I put them through that? I love them. Loving people don't do that.
Right.
But this is not that same thing, right? Like God is considering us his family here. Even part of it is, blessed are the peacemakers will be called children of God. So God is considering him as children, but now he's asking him to go through this persecution, being on the opposite end of evil being done to you,
Mm-hmm.
mourning, things like that. What speaks to God being loving with all that in mind?
I mean, I kind of hit on it earlier a little bit. It's like
Mm-hmm.
he knows all of these emotions way more than we'll ever understand what it means to, like, for instance, mourn.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are almost 8 billion people in the world right now, that are all created by him in his image for his glory. And there's, I don't know, I'm not going to give an exact number, but there's an X amount of people who are not living up to that. Like, could you imagine the heartbreak and like the amount of pain that would bring to have 8 million people that are alive, or 8 billion people that are alive right now? That's not even including throughout all of history. That like he wants to simply for us to choose him and to love him. Like he knows these emotions so much greater and so much more profoundly than we do, that like it can only be because of love. You know what I mean? Like he's not putting us through anything he hasn't already gone through a millionfold. You know what I mean? So I feel like that's like what truly points to why he's such a loving God. Because like he's gone through it and he's willing to go through it again because he loves us. Why would someone die on the cross, the most probably painful death there could be, if he didn't love you? And he would do it for simply just me alone, if I was the only one that was off the course. Like it just truly shows the greatness of his love that he has for us, because like he's willing to do it over and over and over again. Because like who likes heartbreak?
Mm-hmm.
Like who likes to be sad? If we're thinking about being poor in spirit, like who wants to be persecuted? Because like we know that like we're going to be hated because the world hated him way before us. Like even though he created it, like his own creation hates him. Like that's just kind of like mind blowing to me on like how much pain that would bring me. So I can't even like imagine what it would mean for him.
I think also too that some of this is, and I think a lot of it, if not all of it, is talking about overcoming evil with good,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like blessed are you when you overcome evil with good, and these are all the
Right.
ways. Because it's, I mean, for example, mourning. When you're mourning, it's because let's say there's some loss that you've experienced.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're mourning. Well, some people's reaction to that is to swear revenge or
Right.
get vengeance, and that just perpetuates a whole bunch of people who are mourning, and now you're deciding who gets judgment, and all of that is considered evil, right? Because if you're deciding that you get to judge, well, now you're going to be judged.
Mm-hmm.
It's evil. You're doing the thing that you considered evil against you. So any way you slice it, right? Revenge from us, particularly, because we're evil by nature, right? By flesh.
Right.
Any way you slice it, revenge is going to be from a place of evil, as opposed to mourning, which is like, I'm not, I'm not looking at you as a person. You're evil. I'm looking at this thing that I've lost in whatever sense it is, right? Because let's say people are swearing against vengeance against God. Some people do that. Of God, you did this to me, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna pay you back. Good luck with that, right? But
Right.
you're mourning because you're deciding, instead of being vengeful and angry, I'm gonna experience this loss
Mm-hmm.
to the extent that I should, because I love them, and I still love the people around me. I hate what happened,
Mm-hmm.
or I hate if there was sin involved, right? I hate what happened, but I would rather mourn and experience this emotion in full than, let's say, swear vengeance against, or
Right.
feel it too much maybe,
Mm-hmm.
or not enough to where we're creating this heart of stone,
Right.
and ultimately pride. The same thing with persecution.
Mm-hmm.
People are going to say bad things about you. Don't say it back,
Right.
right? If it's for righteousness, good. Like, that's a good thing, ultimately, because you're overcoming evil with good, and they're going to do that, right? That's their push. That's their way of pushing back. So I think that's also what speaks to a loving God, is that,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, some of this is tough to put on your children. You don't want to,
Right.
but ultimately you also don't want your children to be evil and then be
Mm-hmm.
away from your children, right? What brings us to Him for eternity is our hearts being righteous, that He makes righteous, but through this process. This is what He's saying the process is, to make our
Mm-hmm.
hearts righteous on His extent, but it's also kind of our choice whether we want to accept that and be involved in that.
Exactly.
So yeah, just overcoming evil with good, I think, is what summarizes a lot of this.
Mm-hmm. I also had another like thing that came to my mind when you were talking about like mourning. Jesus truly knew what it meant to mourn for a loss of a loved one.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it even more so rings true because he had the power to do something about it. So like when his
Mm.
earthly father Joseph died, he had the power to bring him back to life, as we see like what he did with Lazarus
John,
and John,
who he
right?
didn't bring back to life.
Exactly, like that's his cousin, that's his dad. And then he brought back his friend, yes, maybe, but like the love that I have for my father, my earthly father, like it's definitely greater than my friends. Like it's my dad. And like he was willing to go through that pain and that loss just so he could understand the pain, or we knew he understood the pain because we can see it and read that. And I feel like people don't like ever think about that like through the life of Jesus. Like his friends and people he cared about were literally dying, and he had the ability to do something about it, but didn't. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that just speaks to like the amount of love that he has for us, because like he's the literally is the perfect example of love.
No, I think that's good too, because this is a two routes
Mm-hmm.
type thought. The first one is like, I think I was considering the term "heavy is the head that wears the crown"
Mm-hmm.
and what that entails, and I think part of it is, when I think of heavy as the head that wears a crown, I think of like medieval times, like kingdoms, a king who, I'm gonna say a monarch, because
Mm-hmm.
that's what I associate with the
Right.
crown. A king, at the same time, when he's sending his troops to battle, has to, if you're a good king, not a tyrannical king. A tyrannical king will be like, "You're gonna go fight for me. I'm gonna stay here."
Mm-hmm.
But a good king would be like, you want to come with me?" A good king who loves his people is like, "You want to come with me? Okay, like, I accept the fact that you want to also be somebody who comes along and fights and gives your life for your country. And
Mm-hmm.
whether you come back alive or not, pray that you do. But if you don't, then I accept that desire." It also means like, you're going to have people that you love go and die, and you're willingly accepting that. Like you are honoring their choice and respecting them by allowing them, because you're king, right?
Mm-hmm.
Allowing them to be alongside you in battle, where you could be like, no, you're going to stay home and not go to battle. But that's not a king thing to do, right?
Right.
Part of the crown is bearing that weight when it comes as to honoring people's choice, respecting people's choices to go and fight and die,
Mm.
if that's what they want to do, if that's what they're called to do. When you're finding a spouse, right, as guys, we're like, let me carry the burden.
Right.
Let the pain and suffering be on me, and I'll work hard, and they don't have to be in the mud. But Pastor Jim, I think, had said the other day, somebody said it, but I think it was Pastor Jim who was saying, you want to have somebody who suffers well, like let them suffer with you, alongside
Mm-hmm.
you. Maybe it was Manny Arango. I don't know. I don't remember. But I know somebody
Yeah.
was saying you want a spouse that's going to be able to suffer alongside you. Like
Right.
that's what makes a good marriage, is who can suffer well. And part of that means you've got to let them do that. Like you
Mm-hmm.
can't just be the man who's like, no, I'll take on all the suffering. You stay out of this. You have to willingly allow them to be part of that
Yeah.
and say, okay, like I respect and honor your decision to do this. Whatever negative consequences come, okay, like I understand the weight of this. I'm allowing this
Mm-hmm.
because that's what you're desiring to do, and I'm not being a good steward of you if I'm not allowing you to do that by
Mm-hmm.
taking that choice away from you. Is ultimately where my thought was, is you're robbing somebody of a choice. You're robbing somebody
Right.
an opportunity to make that choice,
Mm-hmm.
and instead making the choice for them.
Exactly. Because I mean, like, if you're like, why would you follow somebody who's not willing to get in the mud with you?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, if you're just gonna call me to go to the mud and suffer through that alone, like, why would I? Like, why would I do that willingly and joyfully if the person doing it hasn't been through the mud ever? I also think part of it is we don't, especially when we're thinking about blessings, is like we want them now.
Mm-hmm.
We want them
Yeah.
right now. Like, God bless me. Like, I want the new car. I want the new job. I want the more money. I want the prettiest girl in the world. Whatever rings true for you. But like, if we go back to the Beatitudes in that last verse, be glad and rejoice because your reward is great in heaven. Like, it doesn't say your reward is great now, your reward is great then, your reward will be great soon. I guess it still could be soon, but that's not the point. The point is, like, the reward will be in heaven. Like, yes, some of those blessings may fall from God's storehouse in heaven, but that won't diminish the blessing that is in heaven.
Yeah, now that you say that too, the only one that's not associated with either heaven, which implies a future,
Mm-hmm.
or like this one, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. The keyword there is inherit, right? So that
Right.
implies future.
Future. Yeah.
The only one that doesn't, at least not in my translation, doesn't have anything on it is mourning. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted.
Right.
So I just think that's interesting. But
Mm-hmm.
that's the only one really that's not associated with a future blessing. And by
Yeah.
future, I don't mean like, a few years
Right.
when you've got, a new house or whatever. I mean
Mm-hmm.
like the kingdom of heaven future.
Exactly. Yeah, I think I didn't even think about that either, just because, like, he's literally promising us to be comforted immediately, and not then, or it is then and now, but it's not like, oh yeah, soon you'll have it. Oh yeah, soon. Okay, like, when is soon? I mean, I always think the challenge is like where our heart posture is, because
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it is so easy to get out of a line, because like we were talking about earlier, just like, again, it's corny, but just being the me monster. Like, only, like, God, no, I shouldn't say only, but like, God bless me and me only. But like, no, like, God, like, bless others through me. Like, just allow me to be a part of this somehow. Um, I think is the challenge of all of it. Just because I think with all of these beatitudes, like, it's our choices that ring true. Like, we can mourn and want to get revenge, but if we're seeking revenge, we're not going to be comforted. Like, no matter what I would do, like, if you were seeking revenge, I can be here to be your shoulder you can lean on. But if you don't want to lean on it, like, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, same thing with like, being merciful. Like, I can show you all the mercy in the world, but if you don't want to accept it, then like, why am I going through all of this just to do that?
Mhm.
So I feel like that is like the true challenge, is to like taking a step back from ourselves and taking a look at the bigger picture sometimes. Because I feel like it is just so easy to look at our little image and not the image of, well, the world.
I would say, because sometimes it is like a mental thing or a heart posture thing where
Mm-hmm.
it's an internal reflection, and I think it's good to do that. I like, you know this, but I'm a personal fan of tangibles,
Yep.
finding a way to tangibly do it
Yep. I'm right there with you.
instead of just saying, like doing.
Mm-hmm.
I would say a good challenge is to find somebody in your life that you can verbally say you're a blessing to have in my life,
Mm-hmm.
and then give a reason why.
Exactly.
Right? Not just, don't just tell them you're a blessing, and then,
Mm-hmm.
because people just need to hear why.
Exactly.
Like,
I think the same thing rings true like when you're praying for people.
mhm.
But like, especially like when you get those texts like, "Oh, I'm praying for you," or like someone walks by like, "Oh, I've prayed for you." Like, okay, like why? What are you praying about?
Mhm.
Like, what are you co-signing my name to the Lord Almighty on?
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I was like, I don't want to co-sign my name if it's something I wouldn't want for somebody else. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Or just like making that generalized statement to maybe make you feel good. I
Yeah,
think it's a
that's true.
great challenge.
I To that, just a quick side note to that. I I think somebody was saying the best practice when you're telling somebody to pray, that you'll pray for them, is like,
Mm-hmm.
do it right then and there. Like,
Yep.
and that's what I try to do, is even if it's something short
Yeah.
where I'm like, I'd rather play something better, more elaborate. I'm like, okay, I'll do it later if I remember to do it later, because
Mm-hmm.
I sometimes I don't.
Right.
So I always am like, even that moment, the simplest thing I can do is pray for this person for
Yeah.
this reason. Amen.
Yep.
That way, if I don't remember later, at least I've held my word that, I will pray for
Yeah.
them, not just arbitrarily saying that.
I mean, that literally takes us back to the analogy we were using. Like, we're wearing the jersey. Someone's telling us to get into the game. Are we prepared to get into the game?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, just because, like, it might, there's such a beauty in being intentionally underprepared for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, it can only be the Holy Spirit speaking through us. Like in those moments of like, hey, can you pray for me? And you like, okay, I'll do it right now. Rather than like, no, like, let me go get prepared and then I'll pray for you.
Yeah.
Like, no, like I need to, like you were saying, like the greatest athletes are already prepared. For them to be on the team, they've been preparing the entire season, the entire offspring for that. You know what I mean? So like the same rings true for us. Like we need to be ready to go to battle and get into the game at a moment's notice.
Yeah. I'll definitely say, like, some of the best praying in the spirit, or like the spirit has the most room to work whenever you're like not ready,
Exactly.
and you're like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah, like
You don't think about it too much.
You have to show up.
Yeah.
Or you're not forcing him to show up. You'd be like, God, like I need you right now to show up, or this is gonna be a flop.
Yeah.
And God wouldn't do that
Mm-hmm.
because He's loving.
All right. Well, thank you for being on the podcast today.
Yeah, man, it was a pleasure.
You were supposed to be on like one or two, and it just took this long to
Took forever.
schedule it. Yeah. So, but thank you for going over some of the beatitudes, blessings. I'm gonna look for more places where it talks about blessing, because I don't know. I know there's tithing and there's praying, right?
Right.
Which is some of the other things that. But more so to say, if there's more to blessing, like tithing and praying, that's not listed here,
Mm-hmm.
then there could be other things, and I would be interested to go over them. So,
right. I'm down.
And also, I think tithing would probably, in and of itself, be something interesting. I read something interesting the other day, and I'll just add this as like a little teaser / foreshadowing of, like, I read, it was in Daniel, actually. I was going over Daniel, and King Nebuchadnezzar puts some of the stuff they had in God's storehouse from Judah, Jerusalem, into his own storehouse, which is the Babylonian culture way of saying, I'm offering the most precious things I have to their gods, right?
Yeah.
So in a sense, even pagans tithe, right? So
right.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I also don't think people realize how much the Bible truly talks about money. Yeah, no, but dude, thank you for allowing me to get to do this with you. It was a lot of fun.
It is fun. That's what I'm saying. It's fun to film and talk about it, because it really, I say it and I'm gonna make a video about it, but it's a study platform first and foremost. So it's not like, I mean, I do have hope to have professionals and educators and all that, but like not exclusively making it about that, because what is the most like what gives the most connectability is like we're all in this together studying,
Mm-hmm.
right? And hopefully people who are following along can add to it in the comments if they want to, or
Right.
take something away that they didn't know before. And that's always the goal. And it doesn't have to be somebody that's, got this official documented paper or
Exactly.
whatever.
A doctorate in theology. Like,
Yeah.
no, like it can just be you, the Lord, and a friend,
Yeah.
or two or three are the Holy
I mean,
Spirit with you there.
Saul's education was literally just God,
Yeah.
Jesus.
Period.
Yeah. So, and then he went on to write like literally books and challenge churches
Mm-hmm.
off the education that Jesus gave him by talking to him personally. So,
Yeah, exactly.
but yeah, thank you
Yeah,
again for
dude.
being here. And thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.
Desperately pursue.